Hey, it's Dr. Paul, and let me go into how to talk to your patients based on their personality. So let's look at this, and this is very helpful. It'll increase your likelihood of communicating and more increasing the effectiveness with your patients. And the reason we need to know that is, generally speaking, we'll take our personality and we'll naturally fit with 50% of the personality profiles, 50%, not 100%. So this is why it's important. Because if you're not aware of it, there's 50% of your patient base that you just won't talk to properly. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times the patients consciously don't, it's not typically conscious on their mind. It's that feeling you get. It's like, you know, when you talk to somebody and it goes well and easy, or you talk to somebody and it doesn't go well and easy, you get it's an unsettling feeling. That's kind of what happens. Now, if it's more obvious, then it gets to be, they don't like you and I'm not coming back. But let me go into the personality profiles and touch on some key points relative to how to talk to certain personality profiles. Okay, so having said that, let's go ahead and look. Now remember, we're gonna look at the DISC profile, the DISC. So remember, the DISC is, D stands for dominant or choleric personality. That's the alpha male kind of thing. The I stands for influencer. That's also known as the sanguine personality. The S is the steady relator or the phlegmatic, and the C is the conscientious or the melancholy. Okay, so these are interchangeable words: choleric, dominant, influencer, sanguine, phlegmatic, steady, conscious, melancholy. So just kind of get used to flipping those back and forth. You'll hear them, depending on who you talk to, flipped either way. So just be aware that, you know, the melancholy personality is a conscious person, a sanguine is an influencer, that kind of thing. Okay, so here we are. First, let's go into some basic mnemonics. What is it that the choleric personality likes? Well, they want to be in control. That's what they want. They want control. So I'm going to share with you how to handle the choleric personality. What does the sanguine want? What is the sanguine? The sanguine wants to be liked. The sanguine wants to be liked. The phlegmatic likes reassurance. Reassurance is really important to a phlegmatic. Low confrontation, reassurance. Melancholy, they're detail oriented and they like to be right. Okay, so having said that, let me go through how I will communicate with each of these patients differently. Now, at work, I'm a high choleric personality. I'm a high dominant personality. That's mine. Now, what does that mean? It means I will offend the phlegmatic personality naturally. I won't even know I'm offending them if I don't tamper it down. I'll offend the melancholy personality. I'll offend them. I can offend the sanguine. Sanguines like to be liked. They like to get along with everybody, so chances are I won't. But these two personality traits I will naturally offend because I'm a high choleric personality. Now, what does that mean if these are my patients? Well, it means I have a much higher likelihood of losing them as a patient if I don't know this and I don't adapt based on their profile. So that's what I did, is I learned how to recognize the person's personality real quick, and we teach how to do that with how they're dressed, their personal hygiene. Your personality is how you dress, your personal hygiene, the colors you wear, the brands you use. You know, it's all about your value system. Everything you do is about your value system and experience. So we teach how to evaluate without even talking to somebody. We'll have a pretty good idea of what personality is. So we got to learn how to do that. And then when we talk to them, we got to pay attention to that. And especially when they sign in, there's, you know, how people write when they sign in. There's common characteristics with how people write when they're signed in. And a lot of times I could look at their history form before I even met the patient, before I even go in the room. I'll look at their history form, just how they wrote, and immediately I have an idea of what personality profile that is. And I cover that separately in another topic. So how do we want to talk to these people? Okay. So if it's a choleric, what are 2 or 3 of bullet points that we want to keep in mind when we're interacting with the choleric personality? Well, number 1, they like control. They're abrupt and to the point. So because they're abrupt and they're decision makers. So they're abrupt and to the point, like control, and they're decision makers. So with the choleric personality, you got to cut to the chase. If you're long-winded, and boy, you can't do that with a choleric personality. You'll frustrate them. So you've got to cut to the chase. Now, the choleric personality is actually the easiest personality to close because they make decisions like this, and they're the authority. So they're actually, but they don't come across that way because they come across as offensive, and their body language and their tone and what they say is kind of abrupt. So it can create a defensive mechanism is what it can do with the doctor. But they're the fastest, easiest ones to make a decision. Unfortunately, they're terrible with treating with their treatment schedules because they do what they want. They come and go what they want. So, all right. So that's the key thing that we need to know about the choleric personality. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be quick and to the point. But I tell you a phrase that I like to use a lot with choleric personalities. And I'll use it pretty quick in the relationship, like pretty fast up in front of the relationship during the consultation. Because they'll get frustrated with you. Especially if you're long-winded, they'll get frustrated with you and they'll tune out. They'll turn off real fast. So real early in the relationships with cholerics, I do what I call state the obvious. And I'll say, it'll sound like this. I'll say, hey, Jim, obviously you're the type of person that can make their own decisions. That's a very good line to say to a choleric personality. Obviously, you're the type of person that can make their own decisions. In other words, what did I just say? I just told him you're in control. See, that's what he wants. He wants control, or they want control. So I just said, I'm going to recognize and give you control. That's what I just said. So I'll say, Jim, hey, let me just share with you, I recognize you're the type of person that can make decisions, that can make your own decisions. Then comes the second part. I said, tell you what, let me just give you the information and you just tell me what you want to do. See, what I just did is I just won them over is what I just did. I said, I'm going to recognize you for wanting to be in control, and I'm going to give you control, but I'm not really giving them control, but I'm saying I am. And I'm just asking that he pay attention long enough that I can do my education. That's all I'm asking for. That's what I'll say oftentimes with a choleric person. I say, hey, Jim, obviously you can make your decisions. You're the type of person that can make your decisions. Tell you what, let me just give you the information, and then you tell me what you want to do with it. Will that work for you? See, even when I say, and then you tell me what you want to do with it, well, I do that with every patient anyway. I give them information and they tell me what they want to do. I do that anyway. But we specifically say it with this patient because that's what they want to hear. So essentially what I just did is I calmed him down and I bought time for him to listen to me. That's what I just did. So it's a really good phrase. Hey, so whoever the patient is, and typically, I mean, I don't just say that right off the front. Typically, as we're going through it, and I start seeing that they're getting a little impatient, because these people get impatient fast. Or I see they're losing attention. That's typically when I'll say it. I'll say, hey, Jim, listen, obviously you can make your decisions on your own. Tell you what, if you don't mind, let me just give you the information, and then you tell me whatever it is you want to do. Okay? All right. All right. That's how you want to handle that one. So you better move fast, get to the point, give them control. All right, let's go to the second one, sanguine. So the influencer is the sanguine. So what's the key points on that? Remember, that's happy, the chatty Cathy wants to be the life of the party. They want to be liked. They want to be liked. Okay. Now, the key points with the sanguine is they'll take off on you everywhere. This is the patient that if you don't know how to control a patient, they're going to go everywhere on you, and you ask a question, they will not even answer it. And next thing you know, you're answering, you're talking about what they want to talk about. So it gets out of control real fast with sanguines. So with sanguine personalities, I've got to reel them in. I got to reel them in. First, I got to be aware that whenever I say or do anything, they're going to go off in left field. They're going to take off on me in another direction. So immediately, I got to get ready to bring them back. And so that's why I say a lot of times we'll say, wait a minute, you're going a little too fast for me. Let me make sure I get all the information. That's how I shut down sanguines. That's how I'll get back in control. They take off, or if they don't answer the question. Because remember, 50% of the time, they won't even answer it. I'll say on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain are you having? On a scale of 1 to 10. They won't say anything. They'll just start talking about how it hurts. Well, when they don't do that, you have to say the exact same words again. Scale of 1 to 10, how much is it? Because what happens is it moves from their lower consciousness to their unconsciousness. The question moves from their unconsciousness to the consciousness. And parents do this with kids all the time. Pick up your socks, Johnny. Johnny doesn't do anything. He's still playing with the truck. Pick up your socks. Now, typically your tone goes up too, but you're not going to do that in your office. Well, pick up your socks, Johnny. Now Johnny's paying a little more attention. Pick up your socks, John. Well, now it's real high, but a tone had a lot to do with that. But the words, saying the same words, that's why you don't want to change the words that you use when you ask a question and the person doesn't answer it. You want to say the exact same words because now they don't have to reinterpret it. It's the same words. And so it goes a little higher in their consciousness level. So I pay a lot of attention to that with a sanguine personality because they're going to take off on me. When I ask questions, I can be guaranteed they will not answer it, number one. So I'm going to have to repeat the question again. And when they do take off, I'm going to have to stop them and bring them back. It's like herding cats. When you have sanguines, it's like herding cats. They're going everywhere and nowhere and won't answer half your questions. And you got to be proactively ready for it. So 2 things that I'm always going to be doing with a sanguine. Going a little too fast for me. Let me make sure I get all the information. That's how I stop them in their tracks and get back in control. Going a little too fast for me, Mary. Let me make sure I get all this information for your medical records. Now the control's back to me. I get going again. That's how I stop them from going everywhere. And when they don't answer the question, scale of 1, whatever question I'm asking, would you scale of 1 to 10, how does it feel, Mary? Well, it's this, and this, and this, and that, and it's this and this. Mary, scale of 1 to 10, how bad is it? 10 ignores. See, I say the same question again. I get ready to say the same question again. So with sanguine personalities, get ready for it. That's how you just have to be proactive. If not, they won't answer half your questions, and they'll go everywhere, and you won't even get half your data, and it'll take you 2 and 3 amount of time just to process the patient. So sanguine personality, that's how we're gonna pay a lot of attention to that. And you should know this. That's why knowing personality profiles is so important. You got to figure this stuff out, quickly. That's why I say, you should learn it well enough that just by looking at how they're dressed, you should know generally what personality profile it is without even talking to the person. Because our personalities come through in our clothes and how we dress and the style of dress and the colors and brands. All of that comes through in our personalities. And we cover that separately. So let's go to the phlegmatic, the passive phlegmatic. That's the person that will agree with everything. That's the person that you think everything's going great. They're going to buy in. They'll accept the report of findings. That's the person in the report of findings that'll go, okay, let me check with my spouse, because they're not the decision maker. But what's so important that's a big thing with a passive phlegmatic. They're not the decision maker. But how we're going to communicate, especially me, my body language, I'm an alpha male. So my body language is more quick and jerky and fast. That's offensive to somebody who's easygoing and passive. Same with my tone. My tone's too high typically for a passive phlegmatic. And my words can kind of be abrupt. So without knowing any better, I'll run off passive phlegmatics left and right without knowing anything about it. So the first thing that I do when I go into the room and I quickly see it's a passive phlegmatic is I drop my tone, because they're typically passive phlegmatics have low tone. I drop my tone, the tone of my voice, and I slow down. And passive phlegmatics like reassurance. You've got the main bullet points of whatever it is you're talking about. You've got to say it multiple times. Get ready to say it multiple times. I mean, if it's a report of findings, if it's money, if it's time, especially if it's the big topics, need time or money. Need time or money. Those are the three big topics. You better get ready to say those topics multiple times with a passive phlegmatic. It is not going to be just you covering it. And it's deceptive because you'll cover it and they'll just agree with you. So you think everything's fine. They are not a disagreeable person. Remember, they don't like confrontation. So when it comes to time, with need, time, and money, need is their problem in their ADL, time is the scheduling, and money is the cost. I make sure that I say it 2 and 3 times. I get their acknowledgement 2 or 3 times. That has to be repetitive. Okay, the melancholy personality, that's the personality that likes to be right. Remember, they're detailed. They like to be right. Okay, so again, that's the other personality I'll conflict with naturally. So if I didn't know any better, my personality will offend these two. But typically, whatever personality you are as the doctor, there's only 2 of them that you'll naturally get along with, and 2 of them you naturally will not. Unless you modify your behavior. And that's why I say you have to be a chameleon. I'm a chameleon. When I go into the room, I cannot just stay in my mode and with me. I go into the room and I quickly assess the personality who I'm dealing with. Do they have high tone, low tone? What's their personality profile? And wherever they're at, wherever their personality is, I'm a chameleon. I'm going to go right into what matches for them. And that's what makes it work. Okay? So the melancholy personality is the same thing. We'll butt heads. A high choleric and a high melancholy, they'll butt heads day and night. Naturally. Not that there's any differences with them. That's just the way it is. So when I have a melancholy personality, a couple of the things that I do is I go into great detail. Now, you can't use a whole lot of words. You can't be, talking about a lot of stuff because that'll frustrate them quickly. They like details, but they like details that matter. They don't want you to. That's like a sanguine talking to a melancholy. A melancholy hates that because the sanguine is talking about everything and nothing, and the melancholy likes the meat on the bone. Give me the details. Don't talk about all kinds of stuff that's irrelevant. And they like to be right. So one of the things, a common phrase that I use with melancholies is whatever they say, number one is I'll never say you're wrong, or I'll never say that's not right. That's like shooting yourself in the foot with a melancholy. So one of the things I will commonly say with a melancholy when I'm interacting with patient education or whatever, and whatever it is they say, because remember, they like to be right. So they'll tell you. They won't even be the doctor, and they'll say, isn't that like this? Or, they're not even a doctor, and they're telling you. So I'll say, well, that's close. I'll never say no. I won't do that. But I'll say that's close, or yeah, somewhat, and then I'll go into the real explanation. In other words, I go into agreement with them first, even though they could be totally wrong. I'll just go into agreement. That's part of, and that's what it'll sound like. It'll sound like, well, that's partly right. Yeah. Let me just add to it. It'll sound something like that. But when I'm dealing with a melancholy patient, when I'm dealing with the main categories, need, time, and money, I'm in great detail. I got to be in great detail. Especially when you show x-rays. Melancholies pay a lot of attention to the detail of an x-ray. So you've got to be really detail-oriented when you go over the categories of need, time, and money, especially the tests, the biomarkers and tests. You can't be vague in general with that. you got to be specific and detailed with those tests. And they'll ask about quantification numbers, and they'll even pay attention to the previous quantification number from the initial exam versus the re-exam. That's how detailed they're going to be paying attention. So when I'm with melancholies, I never tell them they're wrong. I don't go authoritative on it, because it's real easy for me, being a choleric, to be highly authoritative. So I don't do that. What I do is I tone down. I don't tell them they're wrong, and then I reaffirm the key points in detail. I want to make sure I get in detail. And a lot of times if they say anything close, that's right, I'll go, yeah. Because that's what they want to hear. They want to hear I'm right. So if they're close, if they're in the ballpark, I'll say, yeah, that's kind of how it works. If it's not totally, I'll say, yeah, that's kind of how it works to some degree. So I'm still okaying them, but I'm definitely not okaying them. That's when you're going to lose. Okay, so this is some major strategies. And I do this real quick. And of course, the more you learn it, you'll look at the person, you'll look at the patient. And like I said, you'll even look at the handwriting. You'll even see them in the waiting room or walk-in, and you'll know, oh, that person is obviously this type of personality. And especially when you walk in the room, you've read the chart, you see how they're dressed, you talk to them for 10 seconds, 20 seconds. You should definitely know their personality within 30 seconds. You should know their primary personality within 30 seconds of talking to anybody. Okay? Especially if you've already got their handwriting, you already seen how they're dressed, now you see some of the wording, you already know, well, is this an alpha male choleric? Is this a high sanguine, happy, chatty Cathy? Is this a passive, easygoing guy? Or is this is he real detailed and neat and sharp with his word and real clean with his words? See, real quick. And depending on who's sitting there, immediately I go into each of those different modes and how I'm going to talk to them. And that's how the relationship works even better. So now I'll get along with 100% of my patients naturally instead of only 50% naturally. So again, it gets back to studying the personality profiles, being used to quickly evaluate a personality, and then think of 2 or 3 bullet points real quick. That's why I tried to stick with just simple bullet points. Go, oh, it's this, I got to reel them in, I got to repeat. It's a sanguine, I got to reel them in and repeat. Oh, it's a phlegmatic, I got to lower my tone, and I've got to do reassurance. It's a melancholy, I better be detailed, I better tone down and be detailed. It's a choleric, I better get to the point and let him know that he's a decision maker, and let me just get the information. See, this is how fast. In other words, you got to be at a state of what's called unconscious competence in your ability to see this and quickly react to it, okay? And that will significantly help your practice.